Read a lot of things that I already know, like you said me 80 centimeters, 100. It's like you think I don't know it, but I already know that you told me. You told me that like you make me like...
Except that you're not doing it.
What?
Except that you're not doing it though.
You doubted and I checked it and it was alright.
Oh, good.
So yeah, I'll be a war of egos now.
Well, it looks short. 24 pin in particular needs to be 100 mil. Otherwise, there's going to be problems. Let's take a look around the back of the build at what I've done with the custom cables. Now, you need to consider that both of the side panels on this case are tempered glass. And so I decided to do things a little bit differently back here, knowing that all of it was going to be fully visible. So I've started to run the 8-pin EPS up the middle with the 24 pin. And this is usually the way that I do things now, whereas previously I used to run it around the outside where you can more easily hide it, but then the cable needs to be a lot longer. So running up the middle here, it does create a bit of a feature out of these cables. If you're really careful with the way you do your custom cables, it just makes them so easy to train. If they're the perfect length, everything fits in really nicely. So you can see how those two cables run together. How I've done this is by cable tying the cable combs. So I've actually run the cable ties through the cable comb and then onto the cable management punch outs on the case. So I'm not sure if you can see that there, but yeah, I'm actually using a cable tie to attach the cable comb itself to the case. And I've done that here, and I think here I've also done it with a 24 pin. So that's how I've managed to get them to sit there like that, really solid. Now, because everything is the perfect length, you can see it all just curves around and it's really clean. And this is why it's so important to get the right lengths. You know, a lot of people when they're ordering cable kits from me, they say, oh, just make it stock, you know, don't worry about it. But all you have to do is grab a wire, run it where your cables are going to be routed, and then measure it. And then if you get the perfect lengths, you know, you can really take it up a notch, as you can see. So you can see the back of the Aquero 6 XT in there. And I mean, considering how high-end this build is and the fact that it does have an Aquero as well, there are really not a lot of cables back here. You know, it's ended up being quite easy to manage. I think the hardest cables to manage for me, the biggest challenge is always those front I/O cables. Like this USB 3 cable, we couldn't sleeve it because the connectors on each end are too big. You can't really modify this cable. That's something you really want to avoid because there's 30 tiny little wires inside of it. So that's the only one we couldn't customize and sleeve, but obviously everything else is. So yeah, you can see the 24 pin and the EPS there, and then all of the PCIe curving around, and they go up through the PSU shroud there. Now all of these cables running along the bottom are for the Aquero 6 XT, coming from the fan splitters. So we have one fan splitter here, Mod My Toys, 4-pin PWM to 4-pin PWM, running 3 of the fans. And, you know, the usual USB cable coming from the Aquero 6, front panel audio running up in this corner here and all the way across the top. There's actually a lot of cables hidden up in this channel here all the way along. You know, this SATA power here is actually only to power the RGB lighting around this power button here. So quite a lot extra cables just for a little bit of functionality, which is usually something that I just like to remove because I'm a minimalist. Now, the other fan splitter is up in the top here. So I'm just going to remove this top panel so that we can take a look. One of the features of the Phanteks N2 Evolve is great dust filters. I really like the way they've set up the front dust filter. Now you can see the way I've wired up the fans on the front here. So this is the way, you know, I always do it. I run them all together down the sides of the fans. And you can see they run straight through there to the splitter. So really clean. You know, the whole point of a splitter is putting it as close to the fans as you can so that you have the bulk of the cables running for the least amount of length. You know, theoretically then you should put it up in the middle here somewhere, but it just worked a lot better down there because there's more room for it. Now, up the top here, I've done exactly the same thing, same splitter, and yeah, you can see all of the extra cables up here for this little PCB. So we have the 3 fans on the top radiator running to one of the fan channels on the Aquarius 6XT, and then the 3 fans on the front radiator running to another channel. So we have a separate channel per radiator, meaning that we can kind of set them up with different fan curves and set them up completely differently. But it's a single loop in this system, so we don't really need to be concerned about that. Whereas if it were dual loops, that is something that you really have to do. You know, with dual loops, you need to run each radiator off a separate fan channel so that you can base one fan curve off the components in one loop, such as, for example, the GPU, and then the other loop off the other components, which might be the CPU and the motherboard. It's really important to split them up.